This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Starting today's show is Jenny Ifft and Joe Parcell from K-State as they review the 2024 Kansas Farm Income Outlook. The pair summarizes crop, livestock, and farm income projections. The Elmer G. Heyne Crop Science lecturer at K-State, Ratan Chopra, continues the show as he talks about the work that has been done at CoverCress and how it could impact agriculture. K-State horticultural entomologist Raymond Cloyd has an update to finish today's show on the upcoming double emergence of 13 and 17-year cicadas and offers a word of caution regarding ticks. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Thursday show by talking about the Kansas Farm Income Outlook from the Rural and Farm Finance Policy Analysis Center. And then to talk about it, we're joined by Flintshire Agricultural Policy Chair at K-State, Jenny Ifft, and Director of the Center for Risk Management, Joe Parcell. Jenny, Joe, thank you both so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Shelby.
Joe, starting off the conversation with you, and before we talk about what this outlook showed, first off talking about how this farm income outlook comes together.
Yeah, thanks, Shelby. So the Rural and Farm Finance Policy Analysis Center, it's headquartered at the University of Missouri, but really represents a lot of different states here, looking across a big chunk of the plains and Midwest, and we're happy to have part of that here at Kansas State University. And, this is a congressionally funded center. And, if you think about this in a historical sense, that historically when we have to compromise on agricultural policy, we kind of take the rear view mirror approach. We kind of guess at it, we compromise, and we see if it works, so we're ready for the next farm bill. The whole idea behind what we call RAF here, center, is to get look out the front windshield. And as policymakers are compromising across the country, for example, what a beef cow producer in Montana may not be the same thing as Kansas. Kansas, corn farmer, it's not going to be the same thing as an Ohio corn farmer. And it doesn't mean we're all going to win, but when we go to compromise, we better know what's at stake here. And I thought I'd mention a couple of things about these, the modeling here is, first and foremost is we do projections and not forecasts. So we don't try to forecast the weather. We don't try to forecast, where dairy prices are headed in the next few months. We really look at long-term trends. We stick to those trends. We talk about normal weather. And, that's a big change from some folks right now that might be looking at what the weather's doing, what prices are doing in the cattle markets and so forth.
Joe, as we talk about this outlook, there's summaries for livestock and crops. And starting off our conversation with these summaries, talking about livestock.
Yeah, let's start off with maybe hogs and pigs and then on the dairy side. So, there we're predicting there, or projecting, I should say, at least on the dairy side, a growth in receipts of 2% and hogs 9%. And again, we're sitting at a pretty precarious time here, and this gets back to that projections versus forecasts. If we were to forecast, we'd say hogs look, there's a lot of brightness in the next several months for hogs with the way the futures market's setting up and depending on what we do on the input side. So again, we'll kind of talk a little bit more about that when we do our September update. And on the dairy side, we're kind of looking for a bottom there in terms of finding some demand. All signs are, but again, that's a little bit more a forecast than a projection. Moving over to cattle, this is the big wild card, especially in Kansas. On one hand, our numbers here are based on what happened at the end of 2023. And big question is that these high prices, how fast can the cow-calf producers rebuild the herd that they sold off there as a result of the high prices and the drought last year? Can we build fast? A lot of hinges there. The other thing is the feed yards, extremely resilient there. In terms of, you think about 5 years ago to today, we're spending about $1,000 more per head on costs. So if you take $1,000 for every 1,000 animals, that's I think $1 million in extra capital that we've got to put through that to run that feed yard. But we're still projecting those numbers to be even year over year, and that's really holding up the Kansas farm income there. So what's going on the livestock side?
And Jenny, what about on the crop side of things?
Well, overall, and this might be a little bit surprising before I talk through it, but crop receipts are up from last year, projected to be up from 2023, about 6%. And broadly, that's driven by a projected return to normal yields and a slight increase in acreage. If you look at our expected yield numbers or normal yields and the prices we're expecting, they're pretty comparable to 2020, actually, if that gives some frame of reference. But to drill down, projected corn receipts are expected to drop in 2024, and that's due to less acreage and lower prices. For some other crops, it looks different. Soybean receipts are estimated to grow by 19% due to more production. Same if you combine sorghum and wheat receipts are also going to increase 19% despite this continued decline in prices and less planted acreage. So a lot of those forecasts have to do with an expected return to normal yields.
And as we think about livestock and crops really coming all together for quite a few farms here. And so, Jenny, what are you seeing for a current farm income summary?
So, first of all, what the key things that are happening with our forecast as we look forward to the next year, recovery from drought in 2022 and in some places in 2023, higher cattle prices. We're assuming trend crop yields or a return to normal crop yields. There's also some relief on expenses. So we do expect lower fertilizer, lower fuel and oil expenses for this year. So if you combine all these, we expect net farm income to increase 21%, but net cash income to decrease 14%. So this is one of those annoying situations where an economist says, it depends. And I'm going to have to explain the difference between those. Now, most years, they're moving in the same direction. So as economists, we like to focus on net farm income because that reflects the totality of a producer's situation. And if I was going to break it down in real simple terms, it includes both money or cash and stuff. And the stuff would be your change in inventories and also depreciation. Now, depreciation is pretty consistent. It's not a cash expense, but it's real. You also have inventories. And so if we're talking about a return to normal yields, producers are going to have more crops. They're going to have higher inventories at the end of 2024. So if you want to look at the both cash and what producers have on hand, the situation in 2024, again, assuming normal yields, is going to look better in 2023. But we also can look at net cash income, and this is something that lenders like to look at a lot because they're interested in producers' ability to repay loans. This is probably also, I think if from the producer's perspective, cash is what you can see easily. That's, what's in your bank account. That's going to be down about 14%. And that puts the Kansas forecast a little closer to what's happening at the national level. So the U.S. Department of Agriculture is projecting about a 25% decrease in both net cash income and net farm income.
What does that possibly mean for Kansas producers then? Surviving or maybe a little bit more of a rough year?
Well, the net cash income is pretty close to 2019. I think if things go as expected, which, sometimes it's agriculture, but, it looks like we're moving into a period of tighter profit margins, after some years that were, not everybody, that for a lot of producers were pretty good. So, net cash income back to 2019, we're moving closer. We're not below average right now, but, unfortunately, the normal in agriculture historically is fairly tight profit margin. And that's where it looks like where we're headed.
Joe, continuing to look ahead, what are some of those long-range projections?
Yeah, Shelby. So, kind of piggybacking off what Jenny said there is, we're looking at, again, this is a little bit of why RAF was set up, was because we've got this deviation here, what's going on in Kansas from the national. And, as we start looking forward, we're going to expect that Kansas is going to trend more, again, normal to where it was and trend with the national, what we see out there in the national. So we're looking for a continued return to kind of a normal, getting up above receipts or income there of $4 billion in 25-26. And again, a lot of this is going to depend on how fast, gets down to the cow-calf, how fast we can rebuild, what's that dairy industry look like there, and again, will we have normal weather, which, as we know, normal weather's hard to explain in Kansas.
If people would like to find this outlook, where can they do that?
Yeah, they can go to ruralandfarmfinance, all one word, .com.
Jenny, Joe, I appreciate you both taking the time to join us today.
Thanks for having us.
That was Flinchbaugh Agricultural Policy Chair Jenny Ifft, and she was joined by the Director of the Center for Risk Management, Joe Parcell, as they talked about the spring 2024 Kansas Farm Income Outlook. If you'd like to find this outlook, I will link it in today's show notes on agtoday.net, or you can also find it by going to ruralandfarmfinance.com. Again, that is ruralandfarmfinance.com. And I'd also like to let you know about some upcoming webinars from K-State's Agricultural Economics Department. The first one is an agricultural net income situation for property tax calculations that will be presented by Alan Featherstone. It's taking place Wednesday, April 17th from 12 to 1. The next one will be a current trends and prospects for the new season in the Black Sea agricultural markets, and that would be presented by Antonia Broyaka. It will be taking place Wednesday, April 24th from 12 to 1:30. And finally, wanting to let you know about the Winning the Game Grain Marketing webinar that is done by Dan O'Brien here at Kansas State University, and it will be taking place Monday, April 29th from 12 to 1 p.m. You can find out more information about all these by going to agmanager.info. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show talking with the Elmer G. Heyne Crop Science lecturer, Ratan Chopra, as he's here at K-State to present. And Ratan, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
Ratan, before we talk about what you're talking about for this lecture, first, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm the Vice President of Research at a company, CoverCress Inc. It's located in St. Louis, state of Missouri.
And CoverCress has something to do with pennycress, and can you tell us a little bit about that relationship?
So CoverCress is a domesticated pennycress. Pennycress is a weed that you would find on the roadside or in the agricultural field. And over the last decade, we've taken that weed and used both traditional and modern technologies to have the features that will make it as a viable crop for the cropping systems of the United States Midwest growing regions.
And so what was that process like of getting it to go from being considered a weed to being a crop?
It was basically you had to think about how do you grow a crop, right? And a crop really needs to grow uniformly, needs to have the stand. It can be managed easily post-harvest. So we started thinking about those as our targets, and we used breeding, we used gene editing, and we used other analytical technologies to kind of make changes that we needed to make it a viable crop.
This is not exactly the same thing that wheat growers are seeing in their fields?
No, it has few changes. It looks different. The seed that you would see in a wheat grower's field at harvest would be black color seed. CoverCress is going to be yellow colored seed, and that's the change that'll allow it to have reduced seed dormancy and would not persist in the fields post-harvest, whereas the Field Pennycress, if it dispersed, it'll persist for years and causes a lot of challenges for the growers to manage it post-harvest.
And why is this something that the company took time to develop?
The opportunity has been there for new alternative crops. People have been talking about this for decades. Now, how do you diversify your landscape? And as people have started introducing different crops, and there's been also markets that are being developed, and one of the bigger markets has been renewable diesel, as there has been increasing demand for alternative fuel, and renewable diesel is one of the solutions, but you need feedstocks. So you can have soybean oil, you can have canola oil, but there's only so many acres of that. So you start looking at the fallow period of this Midwest growing regions, and you start thinking about these crops that can fit in. and serve as a feedstock to fulfill the demand that's increasingly growing. I mean, you're looking at about 6.5 billion gallon demand of renewable diesel by 2030. So you need feedstocks, and how do you make that happen? So CoverCress serves as one of the solutions for that opportunity.
And how would this fit into agriculture here in Kansas and our surrounding states?
So when the company was founded, the whole idea was we would be in corn and soybean rotation. And we continue to think about that. But there is a lot of different types of cropping systems that exist in the Midwest, including Kansas. You think about corn, bean rotation, you could have wheat, soybean rotation. So it could be either for diversification on the landscape. After a couple of seasons of wheat growing seasons, you could bring in a CoverCress, or you could introduce it as a third crop between corn, CoverCress, bean, or if somebody's doing bean, CoverCress, bean. So there's a lot of opportunity there, I think. It really depends on the growers, how they want to manage their land, but it's an additional crop with the revenue, and that's the key focus for us.
And what impact could CoverCress have on the environment?
Yeah, so that's a good question. You think about growing a crop in a fallow season, right? I mean, you're protecting the soil. Think about the wind, wind erosion, soil erosion. So it's going to help you protect the ground, which is key. And then when you follow some of these row crops, they have a lot of nutrients that doesn't get used completely. So then it gets into your water wells. So your water wells are contaminated, and it's not a new problem. So these crops can uptake that excess nutrients that there without having to contaminate your water. And then when it's on the landscape, you have increased biodiversity. You could have insects, other habitats that could be changing ecosystem over time.
Is this something that producers could be putting in their field now, or is waiting to really go out and be widespread?
We are starting our initial launch in southern Illinois. This year we'll be having about 7,000 grain production acres and about 14,000 demo acres. And we hope to be continuing to increase our geography and footprint, expand on the west side towards Missouri and then east on Indiana and Ohio, but eventually get into the peripheral markets that like we see Kansas being as a huge opportunity, Iowa being as another opportunity. We keep thinking about how do we grow this crop, because there's a huge market for the renewable diesel, but also there is a lot of land that's available that could be used in the off-season to produce this oilseed.
As you think about CoverCress, what makes you excited for its future?
I think it's just one example of how we can change the landscape. And I think it'll be nice to see this be sort of like a first step towards changing the environment and improving the soil health, improving the maybe air quality by having the renewable fuels. But I hope it's not the last. I hope there's multiple crops like this that will come online, and a success story will help build more crops and diversify our landscape.
If people would like to find out more information about this, how can they do that?
CoverCress.com.
That was the Elmer G. Heyne Crop Science lecturer at K-State, Ratan Chopra. Before we cut to a break, we're now going to be joined by Ron Wilson, who is the director of the Huck Boyd National Institute for Rural Development here at K-State, with a Kansas profile.
This is Kansas Profile. I'm Ron Wilson, director of the Huck Boyd National Institute for Rural Development at Kansas State University. You raise me up, say the words of a popular song by Josh Groban. Those words would also be an appropriate way of describing a rural Kansas woman who is raising flowers with the goal of raising the spirits of her customers. It's today's Kansas Profile. Dawn Alexander Holla is the founder of Oskaloosa Flower Farm at Oskaloosa. She's had a long journey to Kansas. Originally from Trinidad, she married a man from Maine. They lived for a time in Ireland. Their daughter married a man from Kansas. Unfortunately, the daughter came down with Crohn's disease and was trying to care for her baby at the same time. The Kansas in-laws asked if Holla would move to Kansas to help the family. She chose to move, and the family ultimately settled in Oskaloosa near her grandchildren. While living in Ireland, Holla had worked as a horse trainer and noticed that holistic land management seemed to help the health of the horses. When she got to Kansas, she decided to apply those principles in raising flowers. I love flowers, Holla said. I love the connection with the earth, she said. Her goal is to use permaculture systems and practice regenerative agriculture. The idea is leaving the land better than you found it by managing the land holistically, Hollis said. She hopes to improve the soil profile by building natural bacteria and microbes in the soil. Many consumers are interested in local foods. Holla points out the benefits of local flowers as well. Many flowers must be shipped long distances to get from growers to the ultimate end users. A lot of flowers are shipped in and need to be sprayed for pests, Holla said. She seeks to raise flowers that are popular but are difficult to ship, so it is a win-win situation when they can be grown locally. I love growing unusual flowers and flowers that are hard to ship, Holla said. Lisianthus, zinnias, and ranunculus would be examples. The lisianthus is an incredibly beautiful flower, Holla said. It is sometimes called the super rose. Ranunculus is another one that looks like a fancy rose. I'm going through an experimental phase, Holla said. I'm working on perennializing lisianthus, she said. Oskaloosa Flower Farm recently received an EQIP grant from USDA to build a high tunnel. She currently sells her flowers at local supermarkets and farmers markets. Eventually, she hopes to have a U-pick operation. My goal would be that florists could also come to the farm for flowers they could use, Holla said. She also plans to operate a mobile farm stand in 2024. Our locally grown flowers tend to last longer, Holla said. Then there are sweet peas, which don't last as long, but have wonderful scent, she said. It's lovely seeing incredibly beautiful flowers grow from the tiniest seed, Holla said. I want to have phenomenal flowers and have them in as many homes as possible, she said. They can brighten someone's day or week. Holla has other creative ideas as well. What if you could have an edible bouquet of flowers, she said. You could have pretty flowers, and if you wish, you could pluck off a petal and add it to your salad, Holla said. Her plan for this spring is to have her grandchildren's school classes come to the farm. We live on a beautiful piece of property, Holla said. The children could pick flowers for their mums for Mother's Day, she said. Flowers can lift people's moods so dramatically, Holla said. I love seeing the joy which flowers bring to people, she said. It's good to find this floral entrepreneur in a rural community such as Oskaloosa, population 1,110 people. Now that's rural. For more information about this ruralpreneur, look for Oskaloosa Flower Farm on Instagram. That's on Instagram. Look for Oskaloosa Flower Farm. You raise me up. Those are the words of a popular song, and they also describe the effect of this ruralpreneur's flowers on her customers. We commend Dawn Alexander Holla for making a difference by caring for the land while producing beautiful flowers in this way. The results give me a lift. For the Huck Boyd National Institute for Rural Development, this is Ron Wilson with Kansas Profile.
We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because we have more for you ahead.
This is Agriculture Today. Along with Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. For this week's horticulture segment, K-State horticultural entomologist Raymond Cloyd has an update on the upcoming emergence of Brood 19 and Brood 13 cicadas, Eastern tent caterpillar, lilac ash borer, and ticks. Raymond, first off, maybe just another update on the periodical cicadas, the 13 and 17-year variety.
Yes, Jeff, we are there, I think. April through June is the emergence of Brood 19 and 13 of the 13 and 17-year periodical cicada. Although they will not occur in Kansas, they will occur close by Oklahoma, regions of Oklahoma and regions of Missouri. So what will start happening is the nymphs will emerge from the soil in perfect synchrony, and then they'll get on any type of structure or tree, trunk, or a post, and they'll sit there, and then the adults will come out, and the females and males will be flying around, and then they'll go into these areas we call chorus centers. And this is where the males sing, and the females are attracted, and they mate. And then the females, basically after that, and they live about 6 weeks, the adults, they will lay their eggs into twigs about a quarter, half an inch size diameter, and they have very sharp ovipositors, which is the egg-laying device. And they can lay 20 to 30 eggs in what we call these egg nests or slits. They can lay a total of 600, and those can actually damage some branches. So later on, after the adults kind of phase out and die out, you might start seeing some flagging or branch dieback, especially in oaks and other large trees. I have been through 2 of these, and I think it's worth the travel to go see millions and millions of cicadas adults just flying around, and they're not going to harm you. They're just out mating, and then they'll lay their eggs, and then they'll die out.
Just really a spectacular event.
From an entomological perspective, it's a phenomenon. It's unbelievable because these are insects, the longest life cycle. They're 13 years or 17 years, and something triggers them to all come out in synchronous emergence, and then they become adults, and they'll last about 6 weeks, and then they die out.
Maybe for some things we might see in the home landscape, eastern tent caterpillar?
Yes, Jeff, this is the time of year. The eastern tent caterpillar is one of our earliest defoliators. When we start seeing leaves of cherry, plum, and apple, crabapple come out, those are the plants that are widely fed upon by eastern tent caterpillar. And they're the ones that create those nests in the crotches of those trees. They come out during the daytime, feed on the leaves, and they go back in. They're very easy to deal with. Just disrupt the nest with a rake or high-pressure water spray and exposing them to the birds, and the birds will eat them.
We might also see the lilac ash borer?
Yes, Jeff. The lilac ash borer is a Lepidoptera. It's actually a moth. And the adults will start laying eggs on the bark of lilac or ash trees, and the larvae will emerge from those eggs and tunnel in and then start feeding in. So if you have a history of lilac or ash borers, this is the time to put a barrier spray on the trunk to kill the larvae before they enter the tree. Like permethrin is widely used as a barrier treatment. You can also get pheromone traps to help detect when they're out. Those will capture the males, and then they'll mate with the females, and then 7 days you'll probably get egg laying by the females. But yeah, keep your plants healthy, water, irrigation, pruning. But if you have had a history, it's probably recommended or an option to put some type of a barrier spray to prevent the larvae from entering into the plant.
Maybe also keep an eye out for ticks.
Yes, ticks with the grass coming out, the vegetation, the ticks are out. Of course, we have the American dog tick, we have Ixodes scapularis, which is the deer tick, black-legged tick, and we have the one that vectors Rocky Mountain spotted fever, Dermacentura variabilis. They go out on the ends of grass and they quest, which means they stick their legs out and they attach. So if you're out in an area, stay on the path. Don't wander into these grassy areas. But we also recommend putting on a repellent like DEET, Picardion. You can spray permethrin on your clothes. Don't get in your skin. We'd mentioned permethrin for lilac ash borer. And then wear socks, light-colored clothing. And then when you come back in, check your clothing, your body, and probably take a nice shower after that. Because it takes, once the ticks, the sea tick in particular gets on you, they'll wander around before they start inserting their mouth parts in your body. So you have the time to wash them off before they put their mouth parts in and start withdrawing blood. The females need the blood for egg production.
That's K-State horticultural entomologist Raymond Cloyd with information on the upcoming double emergence of cicadas, eastern tent caterpillar, lilac ash borer, and ticks. For more information, contact your local extension office. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.